Okay, so hope you found those videos pretty interesting. The first one talks about Gene Kelly, and if you're unfamiliar with Gene Kelly, very famous, I believe, director, filmmaker, also clearly dancer, um, actor extraordinaire. Um, what I found so interesting about that piece, um, what did you think about when Kenny talked about being put on the spot? And he said, I was put on the spot and I didn't really have anything prepared, but he worked with what he had. And what he had is what he knew about the person. What he knew about the person, and he wanted the choreography to feel authentic. So he started um, kind of saying, well, we'd work on moves you already have, which made Gene Kelly feel more comfortable. Gene Kelly, who was not originally going to dance in this movie, he was known as a dancer. Um, and what I think is interesting about that is Kenny created a space where Gene didn't feel like he had to be someone else. He didn't feel like he was going to be doing these wild and crazy dances with this newfangled choreographer who was going to mess things up for him. No, he could still be himself and engage, which meant differentiating for him. Something that cool I thought about the Dirty Dancing thing was I thought it was really interesting how he built dances around people's strengths. In the same way that we differentiate for our classrooms, he considered what are people's strengths, what can they do well. Oh, that's really interesting. Let's see how we can make that work for us, while still fitting the mold of these different styles of dance that were really popular during the time period, while not losing that, and yet still bringing an aspect of authenticity. Now, the next one I find very fascinating. That was the meeting he took with Leonardo DiCaprio for the role of Max in Hocus Pocus, which, if it was unclear, that was the role that they were talking about. What I found so interesting here is at this time, Kenny Ortega, in 1980, he directed Xanadu. In 1992, he directed Newsies, this giant musical. He's the choreographer from Dirty Dancing. He's a big deal. And this kid comes into his office just with a bad attitude and very honestly, Kenny kind of looks at him and is like, I mean, dude, you do not have to be here if you don't want to be. You can leave. If this is not for you, if you're. And in that space, gave this kid the space to say, I'm sorry, my head is in a lot of different places and I feel bad. The real thing is that I feel bad meeting with you. And he's like, well, I'm about to make myself a sandwich. Are you hungry? Starving. He gives the kid a sandwich. He lets the kid talk. And in hearing him talk, he sees this authenticity in him, this realness, and this just, I think Kenny called it just so very teenagery. He was such a teenager, and he just loved it. Kenny Ortega, a director, big time deal, is what many would call disrespected by Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, many people would say he was utterly disrespected by this kid who didn't show him, the gratitude or the respect he deserved in this moment. But Kenny is gracious about it. And not only that, but did you hear him before when they asked him about they asked him about Leonardo DiCaprio? But before he even went to talk about that meeting and how much he thought Leo was he was a superstar, you heard him be so gracious about who he did get to work with. And he raves about the people he got to work with. He raves about them and talks about their authenticity and talks about, just what wonderful things he saw in them, because he was exercising gratitude and practicing gratitude. Practicing gratitude brings joy to our safe spaces. Practicing gratitude means we're not constantly thinking about what we don't have and considering what we do have. And I think that has a lot of value as well. I just really found that as a very profound moment, that sometimes I feel like we think that, well, if this kid doesn't want to learn, I can't teach them. And, he talks about it later. He says, no, Leo would go on to be nominated for Academy Awards for the other roles that he took. And keep in mind, Leonardo DiCaprio was like 17 or 18 years old at this time. So he was still a kid. He was the same age as some of our students. And we know some of them are goons. Another thing I thought was interesting, which I have on the slide, but it was a really short clip and I just didn't have it in me to make another video with it, was that he had all of the women, all the witches from Hocus Pocus. He had them each practice riding their broomsticks to kind of like get the feel for it and feel how they would specifically ride, but wouldn't let them watch each other practice because he wanted each of them to have their own authentic way of doing it because he thought it was so important to the core of who the witches were. And again, he does this thing where he wants it to feel like them, and in encouraging a space where I want this to feel like you, not about what I want, but about what you need to feel comfortable and to make this your own. I thought that was also a really cool thing. All right, you're moving on to the next segment.